Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Wednesday, September 10th, 2025. Professor Jeffrey Sachs is here on just how the Israelis blackmail Washington. But first, this. We all know how devastating war is. Lives lost, communities destroyed. But war can also threaten your financial freedom. That's where America's heading, our growing involvement in global conflicts. It means more spending, more debt, and a weaker dollar. That's a direct hit to your wallet. So here are three things to keep your eyes on: exploding debt, declining dollar, rising prices of gold and silver. These things are already happening. Goldman Sachs predicts gold could hit $4,500 an ounce by 2026. Why? Because central banks and smart investors are buying gold hand over fist. They know what's coming and they're hedging against it. Currency collapse, inflation, and market volatility. Gold has been a trusted store of value for thousands of years, and today we need that protection more than ever. Call Lear Capital now at 800-511-4620 or visit LearJudgeNap.com. No one is going to protect your wealth for you. You need to do it yourself, and now is the time. Professor Sachs, welcome here, my dear friend. Thank you for accommodating my schedule. Before we get to Israeli blackmail of Washington, to your other field of expertise, which is international economics, of course, how significant have the week's meetings been for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Eastern Economic Forum, and BRICS? How profound is that economic gathering thumbing its nose at the West?
Basically, we should understand that the United States now is about 14% of the world economy. Economists measure this by the gross domestic product, and we use something called purchasing power parity to adjust the GDPs of different countries of the world to get a scaling. And the US is about 14% of the world economy. China at this point is about 19%. It's a larger economy. Not shocking, because China has more than 4 times the US population. So when the BRICS get together, this means China, India, Brazil, Russia, South Africa, and a number of other countries, not quite so large. We're talking about more than 40% of the world GDP. We're talking about a grouping that is larger than the so-called G7 countries, which are the countries in the US alliance, the US, Canada, United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan. In other words, the BRICS countries that this year have the presidency with Brazil are larger, significantly larger than the G7 in economic weight. When we talk about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it's a slightly different grouping because it's basically an Asia group, not a global group, but it also includes Russia, China, India, Central Asian countries, Belarus, and when you add
Indonesia, Jeff?
Indonesia, yes, part of the SCO. Yes, I think so. And pardon me for not being absolutely sure. Indonesia, President Prabowo was going to go, ended up going to one of the events in Beijing. So I think that that's right. And Indonesia, by the way, is a huge country, a huge part of the Southeast Asian economy, almost half that population. With the SCO, which is basically this Asian group, this is also more than 40% of the world population, almost half of the world population. And not only is the share of either the Shanghai Cooperation Organization or the BRICS, where Indonesia certainly is a member. Not only are those populous and a substantial fraction of the world output, but they're also the fast growing part of the world economy. They are poorer per person, but being poorer also means that they have more headroom for fast growth. They're catching up, in other words, with the income levels of the United States and Europe. And so they are a large part of the world. They are the fast growing part of the world. They're actually the high saving part of the world also. In other words, of that part of your annual output, what do you put aside for investment in the future? In China, it's more than 40% of the annual output that's put aside. And China sometimes reached more than 50% of its annual output that it put aside in investments in fast rail and long distance power transmission and conversion to electric vehicles and so forth. In the United States, we're barely saving right now, around 15% of our output, but even that is mostly depreciation now. In other words, it's mostly saving just to make up what is wearing out or depreciating each year. So slow growing and low saving part of the world. These other groupings are a fast growing and high saving and investment part of the world. And this is coming as a huge shock to the egos and the psyches of the Western leaders who think this is all perfidious and evil and how can this be? And Donald Trump sits there giving his orders to each of these countries. Brazil, you must change your judicial process. And Russia, of course, you have to stop your war in the next 10 days. And India, we're going to punish you for buying Russian oil. And China, the list is too long even to mention. And they look and say, well, he's not our boss. He's not our emperor. And then they say, no, thank you. And then the United States really gets upset, and Mr. Peter Navarro goes out and says these are despicable vampire economies and adds to the venom. And these places, which are billions of people, are looking on at the United States and saying, that's a rather intemperate way to act. You told us you were a partner. You told us that we were together in this. And so this dynamic that's underway right now, where the US is making demands of more populous, larger economies, and demands that are absolutely weird and arbitrary and hypocritical, one after the other, it's just not playing well. Not at all. It's not strengthening America. It's not getting other countries to bend to our will. It is accelerating their view that, well, the US is an unstable, rude, intemperate, unreliable, untrustworthy place. Maybe we should get together ourselves and have a calmer, more stable relationship among ourselves.
And I guess the timing of the 50% tariffs on India from the Western perspective couldn't have been worse.
They were shocked, by the way, because our security...
Let me just stop you for a minute so that you and the viewers know what we're watching. France is paralyzed as we speak by a massive strike, which started in Paris and apparently is growing or has grown throughout the day in response to the now ex-prime minister's budget cuts and the collapse of his government. People are not working, not eating. Well, they're eating, but they're not consuming. They're not going to businesses in an effort to shut down the government. Another example of the collapse of Europe. But back to the significance of Trump's ill-timed and poorly thought out tariffs on India.
But it's very relevant, this scene from Paris, because Paris is in a big debt crisis, and the budget is out of control, and the debt has reached 114% of GDP. And in the United States, it's only reached 100% of GDP. And Britain is in a deep crisis. And the German chancellor tells his people, we have to arm militarily and we're going to have to cut our social spending because of that. In other words, the demands are coming from a Western world, if I could call it that is overstretched, that is poorly managed, where the politicians, one after another, starting with Donald Trump with an approval rating of about 38% and a disapproval rating more than 50%, and Macron in France with an approval rating under 20%, actually, with Starmer in the UK with an approval rating, I think, of maybe the low 20s, with Merz in Germany, the chancellor's approval rating plummeting as well. The West is making demands of the rest of the world, but it can't even manage its own society, its own social issues, its own political stability right now. And yet it's so used to bossing the rest of the world around that it continues to do so, even though we have the question, will the US government remain open by the end of the month? But no, Trump is off making his demands. He said yesterday, vis-a-vis India, he told the Europeans, you should put 100% tariffs on India and China because they're importing oil from Russia. So more demands on the rest of the world, which of course, all of them completely brushed aside, but which just makes the US even more absurd in the eyes of these other countries. And with instability rising throughout Europe, we should get our house under control. We should end these wars. We should stop the crazy wars of Israel and start attending to some of our real problems right at home.
Professor Sachs, what is your take on yesterday's Israeli and U.S. supported attack on Doha?
Illegal, reckless, profoundly destabilizing. Again, this is just like the attack on Iran a few weeks ago, where the attack was to kill the negotiators of ongoing negotiations. Honestly, Israel can yell Hamas all it wants. Who they tried to kill yesterday were the people negotiating the ceasefire. Israel doesn't want a ceasefire. It wants to kill as many Palestinians as it can, or ethnically cleanse them, or crush them one way or another. It doesn't want a ceasefire. That's why they bombed Doha, tried to kill the negotiators, and ordered their troops into Gaza City all on the same day, with hundreds of thousands of Palestinians clinging to their lives right now facing another onslaught. This is a murder machine. This is not a state of law. And by the way, Trump said he didn't even know about it for something that's been prepared, obviously, for many, many weeks. And it's quite possible he doesn't know about it, because it's quite possible that he's basically the figurehead, and that the Mossad and the CIA certainly knew about it. But maybe they didn't happen to mention it to the president until the last moment. This is absolutely possible in our system.
How is it that you have referred to the dominance of Israel over Washington as one of blackmail?
Oh, because it's well understood that the use of blackmail has been a standard part of American politics for a long time. We don't know most of it, but we certainly know enough that Epstein, for example, was a Mossad agent and engaged in uh, gathering compromising materials, let us say, of the American political class. And that's why the files suddenly weren't there. That's why Donald Trump's signature isn't his signature. Come on. Come on. This is so sad and so pathetic.
Why is it that the Doha radar and air defenses were down when the Israelis attacked? Aren't the radar and air defenses for Doha operated by the enormous U.S. military base right outside of Doha?
Wouldn't that be nice to know how that happened? Again, Donald Trump may well have been the last to know. It's possible. I don't doubt it. But the United States government surely knew. Israel was not flying all that way without the U.S. security apparatus absolutely knowing what was happening. Period.
Would Netanyahu have said, I want your permission to do it, or we're doing it?
No, clearly he doesn't have to ask any permission because he knows that the permission will be granted. So there's nothing to ask. It's always granted by the U.S. He can give deniability to Donald Trump or he doesn't even have to ask. So no, but Mossad and the CIA coordinate, that's for sure.
Well, we know that the Royal Air Force jets refueled the Israeli jets midair. If the RAF was involved, MI6 was involved. If MI6 was involved, CIA was involved. It doesn't take very much to connect these dots.
Of course. This is the most important point. We are not run as a democracy. Donald Trump may be in no more position to do much about this than we are. This is Mossad, which is a global killing machine. And by the way, all the Israeli politicians came out immediately after this and said, we will go anywhere. Our long arm reaches anywhere. Yeah, they feel absolutely the impunity to murder people anywhere and to bomb people anywhere. And that's why Israel is engaged in wars everywhere right now.
Here's the president yesterday. I'd like your views on whether his denial is credible. Chris, number 16.
The Israeli strike earlier today.
Well, I'm not thrilled. I'm not thrilled about it.
This sounds more like a conversation.
I don't have to do that. I'm not thrilled about the whole situation. It's not a good situation. But I will say this: we want the hostages back, but we are not thrilled about the way that went down today.
Did they notify you in advance, Mr. President? Did Israel tell you in advance?
No. So you were caught by surprise.
I'm never surprised by anything, especially when it comes to the Middle East.
How did you learn about this happening?
I'll be giving a full statement tomorrow, but I would tell you this: I was very unhappy about it, very unhappy about every aspect, and we got to get the hostages back. But I was very unhappy about the way that went down.
Do you think the Qataris will ask for that $400 million jet back that they gave to the president personally?
Sad to say they won't. They won't.
Do you think they'll close down the American air base there, which is the largest in the Middle East, and tell the U.S. to go home?
No, they won't do that either. It's so sad how we're trapped in this unbelievably bizarre opaque, Israel-led debacle after debacle. Everyone remains a bit supine in this, even Donald Trump, who was disappointed and found out at the last moment and made the call, by the way, supposedly to warn the Qatar side as the bombs were actually dropping. Talk about a figurehead. That's a figurehead. He didn't express displeasure. How could we not have known from our ally? Of course they knew, but maybe he should figure out why he wasn't told.
Can Marco Rubio be the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor at the same time? I don't mean legally, can he? But as a practical matter, can he? Is not the National Security Advisor someone whose office is right outside of the Oval Office with a huge staff reporting to him in the West Wing, manned by professionals who analyze intelligence and military and economic information that report to the president? Does Donald Trump have the benefit of all that anymore?
As a practical matter, I don't know whether Marco Rubio can be either Secretary of State or National Security Advisor, because I don't see any signs of any competence. So I don't know whether he's up to any of these or either of these jobs, much less both of them. We have the biggest amateur hour imaginable. By the way, when the professionals run things, it's often not better because our professional CIA class has led the US from one disaster to another. But what we have is the disasters continuing, but absolute amateur hour. So it's all improv, which we just saw in Donald Trump's own remarks. It's complete improv. Hamas was supposed to be considering a ceasefire proposal. Instead, let's kill them. That's a little improv, if that's what passes for U.S. foreign policy.
Here's the Qatari Prime Minister yesterday, Jeff. Chris, number 15.
The Israeli attack that took place today on in the state of Qatar, we can only call it as state terrorism that is being exerted by someone like Netanyahu, given his attempts and his policies as he tries to threaten the regional security. This is only a clear message to the whole region, and this message says that there is one player, and there's also a disrespect to all the policies and also a violation to the sovereignty of all the countries and the states. Netanyahu said himself that he will reshape the Middle East. Does he mean that he's also going to reshape the Gulf region? I think that we have reached a decisive moment. There should be a retaliation from the whole region in the face of those barbaric actions that only reflects one thing. It reflects the barbarism of this person that is leading the region to, unfortunately, to a point where we cannot address any situation and we cannot repair anything and we cannot work within the frameworks of international laws. He just violates all those international laws.
Who would negotiate with the Israelis ever again? And who would accept an American lure into a negotiation ever again?
The Gulf Cooperation Council, which is the governments of the Gulf region, should absolutely end the diplomatic relations with Israel, end the Abraham Accords, and not only because of yesterday's attack, but because of an ongoing genocide in Palestine. Of course, they should understand that Israel could not do any of this without the United States, and that is a big problem for them because they almost are trapped with U.S. military bases all over the Middle East region. But the fact of the matter is, the Arab League and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and the SCO and the BRICS and the African Union and the UN General Assembly all have to say to the United States, this is absolutely untenable. It's illegal. It is in war crimes. It is in gross violation of the will of the world. It happens, by the way, they might mention it, that it is gross violation of the will of the American people. And it is leading the world to disaster. Israel is, yes, his Gulf region is at risk because Israel is at war all over the region using F-35s. By the way, U.S. provided military equipment and support. This is a partnership of Mossad and the CIA. They let the president in once in a while, I suppose, on all of this. But this is a partnership that is absolutely reckless and dangerous for the whole world. And I would have thought that a genocide would have been enough to alert this. Deliberately starving 2 million people, I would have thought would have been enough to alert this. But it seems that the tolerance for roguery is almost unimaginably large. But yes, the time has come, as the Prime Minister rightly said, to stop this. The way to stop this is to create a state of Palestine and to put Israel back in its borders, not in this lawless, murderous regime which thinks it can go anywhere and murder people anywhere that it wants. It has to stop and live like the rest of humanity is supposed to live according to standards of human behavior and international law. And this can be done, but the United States is the only protection and shield of Israel. So if Donald Trump or the CIA head or whoever's really in charge would think about it and think about America's interests, this would stop.
Professor Sachs, thank you very much. These are dreadfully important things that we discuss. You've been kind enough to come on for a second time this week. And of course,
it's a pleasure. But let me add, by the way, I checked in the interim, Indonesia is not a member of the SCO. So just
all right,
so
all
we
right.
can keep it for the record.
All right. That's probably coming, but it's not yet there. Thank you, Professor. Only you would do this research mid-show, but somehow I'm not surprised. Thank you, Professor Sachs. All the best. Safe travels. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Okay. And coming up at 1 o'clock this afternoon, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. At 2:15, Aaron Mate. At 3 o'clock, Professor John Mearsheimer. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.